Hello, everybody. It's Vinyl Rich here with a contest entry to Vinylverse. I believe it was 300 subs, but he's got 400 and something now, so I could be wrong. But it's through the years. He wants you to pick 4 years that are important years in your life, I guess, and show some records from those years. This one's brought to you by Coke Zero. Now, a lot of guys and gals are showing, the year they were born, the year their kids are born, the year they got married. I'm going to show the important stuff. So the first year I'm going to show is 1965. And that's the year the Dodgers won the World Series against the Minnesota Twins. Sandy Koufax didn't pitch the first game. He pitched the second game. Got a win. He pitched game 5 and he pitched game 7, I believe it was. Shutouts on both of those. I think he pitched game 7 with 2 days rest. And what I remember, I don't remember the games at all. 65. I would have been 9 years old, but I do remember we were at Disneyland on one of the games that Koufax was pitching. And all the men, you could hear the game being broadcast at Disneyland because everybody was walking around with the transistor radios. And you could hear Vince Scully, best announcer in sports, announcing the game. And my dad had a transistor radio as we were going around Disneyland. And I remember that to this day. And great year, 65. And I picked the 5 best albums, in my opinion. I came up with these rather quickly, except for 1 year. 1 year I did a Gimme 10, so I just stuck to that. But anyways, the 5th best album of 65 is Out of Our Heads by the Rolling Stones. It's got Satisfaction on it, which was the first Stone song that really grabbed my attention. Now, my brother was a fan of this band before that, but it was Satisfaction that really grabbed my attention. Fantastic. The 4th best album of 65 was The Byrds, Mr. Tambourine Man, their first album on Columbia. Fantastic album. They came out with 2 albums in 65. This one and Turn, Turn, Turn. This is a much better album in my opinion. Fantastic album. I mean, every song on this is just great. 3rd best album of 1965 is Bob Dylan's Bringing It All Back Home. Now, in my last video, I showed a Bob Dylan. I bought a Planet Waves. And I made the statement that there's only really 3 Bob Dylan albums that I really need. And people kind of insinuated that I didn't have any other Bob Dylans. I do have quite a few Bob Dylans. And this is, in my opinion, the 3rd best Bob Dylan album of 1965. Mr. Tambourine Man's on here. It's got Maggie's Farm, She Belongs to Me, Subterranean Homesick Blues. I mean, why am I reading it off? It's just fantastic. But he upped himself, and this is the 2nd best album from 1965. Bob Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited. This album is great. It arguably could be the best album of 65, but I had to pick Rubber Soul. This is a U.S. copy in mono. No, this isn't my stereo one. The stereo of this is really weird. You have all the vocals on one channel and all the music on the other. And it's just really weird if you listen to it on headphones. And I've heard people say it's almost like you get 3 albums in one, You got the stereo mix. You can play the one channel and just have the acapella. My last video, I kept saying Acapulco. I don't know what the hell. I had a brain freeze. And then in the other channel, you could just play the instrumental versions. But yeah, I love this album. Number one album of 1965. Now, what's the next great album? The next great year in Vinyl Richie's life. Well, it involves the coolest person in sports in the history of sports. And that's Joe Namath. He predicted it, and they did it. The lowly New York Jets won the Super Bowl. They're the ones that brought the AFC. I mean, they were considered a laughingstock. And that was actually the first football game I remember watching. Because there was so much buildup, and I remember seeing Joe Namath, and I go, man, that guy's cool, you know. You know, people talk about heroes and that. I don't really have, you know, celebrities as heroes. With the exception of Joe Namath. I mean, it's not like I idolize them. I just thought they were cool. Joe Namath and John Lennon. Those are the two. And you know, pretty much it ends there, you know. But, yeah, he was cool. But what were the cool albums from 1969? Well, number 5 is the second album by Neil Young. It's such an improvement over his debut. This album is fantastic. Really cool cover. I dig this cover, man. Him and his dog. I love dogs. But yeah, Cinnamon Girl. I mean, there's no bad songs on it. Very good album. The fourth best song from 1969 is the Stooges' debut. And I showed this in my vinyl tag as my best dollar find ever. The Stooges' debut. Found this in the dollar bins when I was a youngster. 13, I guess. 14. The third best album. And this could arguably be my favorite, but I'm putting it at 3. And it's Miles Davis, In a Silent Way. This, for me, I mean, I like Miles Davis albums before this, especially his late 50s stuff. But this here started a run of records that I think are my favorite in jazz, and it's my favorite period in jazz. But yeah, this is a fantastic album. If you're not into jazz, check out In a Silent Way and Jack Johnson. But yeah, this is my third favorite. Now this next album, 1969, this album blew me away. When the first time I heard it, I was at my cousin Guy's house, and it's Led Zeppelin 2. Now I never really heard the first album until after I heard this one. I prefer this album. The first one's good, but I prefer this one more. And this is the one that blew me away, and it's like, man, I never heard nothing like it before. Led Zeppelin 2. And a no-brainer, the best album of 1969 is Abbey Road by the Beatles. It could be their best album. I stated in my video finds, a couple of video finds ago, that the White Album is my favorite. But I said it's not maybe not their best. This probably is their best. Maybe second best. Sgt. Pepper, man. I'd have to pick that as my best. Whatever, you know. The Beatles. Now the next year, 1981. What happened in 81? Oh yeah, that's right. The Dodgers beat the Yankees finally. Man, those two teams battled each other I don't know how many times. Reggie Jackson, Mr. September, was it? Fantastic, dude. But the Dodgers lost the first 2 games, and it's like, oh. And I remember watching these games. Oh. But then they came back, and they won 4 in a row. And they kicked the Yankees' ass. And I think that's the last time the Dodgers and Yankees played in the World Series against each other. I could be wrong, but I think it is. Anyways, the 5th best is the Gun Club. Now, I did a Gimme 10 for 1981, so I'm going to go strictly by that, because I did listen to a lot of records to make that video. And this is what I came up with. The Gun Club, Fire of Love. Fantastic LA punk band. Gritty Delta, I don't know, gumbo blues, bayou blues. Just fantastic, dude. Politically incorrect, fantastic punk rock music. Number 4. Fourth best album of 1981. Wall of Voodoo. Their first full length. It was their second record, Dark Continent. In my opinion, there's not a bad song on this album. Fantastic. There were actually 2 singles they played off of this on K-Rock. One was Back in Flesh and the other was Red Light. Got quite a bit of airplay here in LA on K-Rock. The third best album is GBH's first full length. Leather Bristles, No Survivors, and Sick Boys. And that's basically what this was. It was their first 2 singles and their first EP all put together on a long player. Fantastic. Just speedy UK 82 punk. Third best album of 81. The second best album of 81 is the Adolescents debut. This could be, if someone said this was their favorite punk rock album of all time, I couldn't argue with them. I honestly couldn't. It's fantastic. It's got a great lineup. They were just kids out of Fullerton. Tony, Adolescent, Tony Cadilla. I picked him as one of my, I think the 6th best singer in punk rock on my best punk rock singers video. Just a fantastic, not a bad song on here. But it's a no-brainer, the number 1 album of 81, because I think it's the best punk rock album ever made, and that's Black Flag, Damaged. The debut with Henry Rollins. It's just fantastic. And what's ironic is this was actually the 3rd attempt Black Flag made at recording this album. They basically, Henry was their 4th vocalist. Their first vocalist was Keith Morris. He quit the band and they released the Nervous Breakdown EP. Then they got Ron Reyes, and they started recording, tracks for the album. And he just quit on him at a gig at the Cuckoo's Nest, I believe it was. So they shit-canned that, and they started re-recording the songs with Des Cadilla. And Des said, I can't handle the singing. He stayed on and played guitar. And, in fact, he plays guitar on this. And so they shit-canned those recordings, and they got Henry. This is the first press with the sticker. But anyways, that's 81. 88! What happened in 88? Well, guess what? The Dodgers beat the A's in 88. What was it? Bob Costas? He announced that this Dodger lineup was the worst team ever to actually make it to a World Series. Game 1, Kirk Gibson hobbles out there, can't even hardly walk, pinch hit, home run into the right field pavilion. That was it. Earl Hershiser, he was the MVP. I think he pitched, I don't know if he pitched 2 shutouts, but he had a hell of a season. And the Bulldog, and he was the MVP, I remember that. But I believe they won it in 5 games. And what are the top 5 albums? Well, number 5 is Alien Sex Fiend Bun Ho. No, Another Planet. Bun Ho is the single off of here. I've been listening to a lot of Alien Sex Fiend the last month at least. I was listening to him. I was going to make a video of my Alien Sex Fiend collection. I had to take a break. But the last 2 weeks I've been listening to him again. And it's probably going to be my next video. My Alien Sex Fiend records. So I'll talk more about that one on that video. Number 4, Butthole Surfers, Hairway to Steven. This is one of their weaker albums, but it's still good enough to make my top 5. I mean, that's some creepy shit, ain't it? And this album's famous because the songs didn't have song titles. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. It just had pictures, you know? Those were the names of the songs, you know, little crude pictures. Third best album, 1988, is Morrissey, Viva Hate, his first album. Enough said. I did a Morrissey video. You can hate on me. Second best album, 1988, is the Pogues' third album, If I Should Fall From Grace with God. I mean, their first 3 albums, I think, are flawless. I recently picked up their 4th. It's great. I don't think it's as good as the first 3, but that's still doesn't mean it's not a great album. But yeah, this is fantastic. And Fairy Tale of New York, it was voted the best Christmas song in the UK. But yeah, great album. And the number 1 album of 1988 technically isn't an album, but I'm including it. And it's Mudhoney Super Fuzz Big Muff. Now you can buy this now with some of their first singles added on, and it's the full length. I'm thinking of getting that, you know. But yeah, Mudhoney's first 12-inch record on Sub Pop Records. Fantastic. And it's my number 1 album of 1988. So anyways, I'm going to leave a link to Vinylverse. Check his channel out. He's a really loudmouth guy. Really rambunctious. And I think you'll enjoy him. If you like my videos, you're going to enjoy him, man. He's a cool guy. I mean, I think he might like Rush, though. So he's not, you know, he does have his flaws. Anyways, take care. Guys and gals, and bikers and skinheads.